I've got a few things here on record keeping with regards to, I've got some workbooks here for both crop and livestock. I guess one of the things I was going to also note here as well is that I do send out electronically this livestock monitor. It's kind of through the Livestock Marketing Information Center and UAA and other cooperating extension things. Updates with regards to a lot of the markets in terms of what's been going on. If you want to get that, you know, not anybody needs more email, but if you're interested in just kind of keeping up in terms of what are the trends in terms of like the last issue we have kind of on beef exports here. You can see beef exports are on a record pace here for this last year, and that's really kind of been helping buoy a lot of the beef prices, and it's also, you know, one of the things that's been, I guess, related to all the other meats as well, too, you know, being higher priced and whatnot, that's kind of going on. But it's kind of interesting that the markets, I mean, China's the biggest wild card out there, and that's really just taken off in the last year, so that's something there. But other reasons for keeping records, I guess, in terms of, you know, just to find out, you know, what it is you can produce, when and how and where. And I like this one here as well. You know, you want to be able to verify where, when, and how things were done, and if everything was done correctly, you know? So, you know, the dog here showing the dogs how it's going to be done, you know. So if you're an alien looking down from outer space, you're going to think the dogs are the ones that are in charge, right? Because we're the ones that pick up after them. But, yeah, I mean, I also say that, you know, our dog, he loves to go for walks, and he says, you know, it's basically like him reading the newspaper in terms of all the smells that are going on and everything, you know. So, I mean, when you think of marking your trail and keeping records, animals have a different way of doing it, but they seem to record pretty well in terms of their, and I think we sometimes forget a lot in terms of what's going on with all of our records and whatnot. But I do have both, you know, crop and livestock, so I guess the question is, I don't know how many people want both. There's, I think, enough for some people to have both. I don't know if there's enough for everyone, but if you want to, I guess maybe we can start handing some of the livestock. These two are livestock. This one's crop. I know it's going to take a little while to get out, but you know, on the crop side, you have to think about, you know, what is your rotation, because you don't want to mix. You know, like say if you have cucumbers this year or watermelons, you know, like I had my own garden, I had watermelons one year, and the next year I put watermelons in. What happened? They didn't do very well, right? A lot of it is related to the viruses and diseases there, so you have to kind of mix around. So the idea is, you know, not to mix these rotations more than 3 years is a good practice there. In livestock here, we're looking, you know, for records to see, you know, what are the best genetics that we should be keeping here. You can't see these real well, but these are you know, different cattle here on the same ranch, and part of it was to see, you know, how they would perform. This is the University Ranch here, UArizona, and you know, when they took over the ranch, there was a lot of cattle that were young, old, they were all mixed up. You know, so a lot of the difference in terms of the profitability there was based on not just genetics, but the management as well, and trying to determine that. We think of financial records like Dean was talking about. We have, you know, we have our revenues up here and our expenses. We either have to lower our expenses or raise our revenues to kind of increase our return, you know, somewhere in between there.
Thank you.
And, you know, in Kansas State, they did this study here on 61 beef cow-calf operations. And this was from 2012 to 2016, so it's a few years ago, you know, before COVID hit or anything. And what was the biggest driver they found in terms of the profitability, in terms of from the revenues to the expenses here, making it the most profitable? What do you think it was?
Feed cost.
Feed cost, yeah, that was it. The variable cost of feed cost. That was the biggest thing. That's what we're talking about right here as well. So, you know, I mean, being able to keep a handle on what your costs are, knowing what they are, and how that's going to impact your profitability is a pretty important thing to keep in mind. You know, top reasons for not keeping the records here. Maybe you've seen these before. You're waiting for your neighbor. You know, you don't have time. It's more fun keeping my lender guessing on my ability to repay. That's probably more like your spouse. You know where your spouse, you know where the money goes, right? And then if you're not that organized, that's what hopefully these record books here can be for you to help you kind of put things just in together. So I'm just going to go through a little bit in terms of what's in here. We have both the three-ring binder as well as the pocket notebooks. So the idea is the pocket books are designed to go with things that you can carry around with you in the field, and then also complement in terms of what goes in the three-ring binder here. A more kind of annual record that you can keep track of year after year after year. With the livestock here, basically we have like the animal records, rainfall records, financial records, and a lot of receipts here regarding in there. So with the inventory records, you can see we're just keeping track of what you have, basically steer, hound, heifers, bulls. You could also, you know, adapt that for sheep, goats, what you have there. Treatment records, again, to keep track of what's been done in terms of vaccination, because that's a lot of what you have to keep track of just legally. Is if you give a, you know, antibiotic or something, you just can't take that animal and sell it. You know, so you're kind of protecting yourself as well if you're keeping track when you administer an antibiotic and then when you actually take the animal to market after that treatment period. Rainfall records, everybody wants to know what it rains in Arizona because it never rains, right? It never rains. Also, I mean, this is things related to the pasture rangeland forage rainfall index. That's probably been one of the most profitable things for a lot of Arizona ranchers recently. That's one thing Dean didn't lead to in terms of his other enterprise, probably is rainfall index insurance, right, Dean? How much money did you make off of that 2 years ago?
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, I know. The average for everyone that was insured was about $800 per beef cow. You know? So that's how significant it was. So, you know, it was a dry year, not just last year, but go back to 2020. But you know, that's the difference between really having money for the feed that you did probably spent that year versus not having it. You know, that was, it's subsidized quite heavily, but it was also because of it was dry for a long period of time, and that, you know, helped ranchers get through in terms of paying for a lot of the feed that they incurred there. So an incident log there as well. You could put in cumulative precipitation, livestock sale records, you know, to keep track of the sales. Those are both in the pocketbook as well as for the three-ring binder there. And then we also have what we would call like these expenses, our Schedule F, matching up with the income tax schedule here in terms of, you know, like feed being here, fuel, grazing fees, labor. A lot of those same categories that are in the Schedule F are in your workbook there to fill in some of your expenses as well. It's not going to be like QuickBooks, I mean, but it's a place to get you started. And also we can put in these folders here because we find that a lot of people just take their receipts, you know, and they don't know where to go. So, you know, okay, well, if it's fuel, you at least start getting it somewhere segregated so you can have some of your records expenses. Because what's the worst thing you want to do is have to pay taxes because you didn't keep track of all the expenses that you had that are legitimate, you know, for the business. So keep that in mind. You know, that can be very important to your bottom line as well, because you have to think about what it is after taxes. And if you're paying taxes you don't need to be paying, that's throwing money out the window as well. The other thing I like to note too is that a lot of people say, well, they don't need to file a return, and that's true. You may not need to file a return, but IRS also says that if you do not file a return, there's no limit on how long you need to keep your records, So keep that in mind. So, you think, well, I never filed, and then you tell that to the IRS person, they're going to say, okay, let's go to your records and back to, when you started in 1995 as to why you didn't need to file your taxes, So that's one thing to keep in mind. A lot of people say, well, I didn't need to file, so I don't have any. But the law is that you basically have to keep your returns, your records, indefinitely. Just keep that in mind. I mean, typically, you might think of, 3 to 5 years keeping records, but if you don't file, keep that in mind, unlimited there. Some software programs that are out there, there's several. CattleMax is one I'm just going to show a little bit. I know in part because the VRV uses that. It'll, puts together in terms of kind of your weaning, yearlings, the animals you have, as well as herd health, finances, equipment. The idea with having a software program, as opposed to like a spreadsheet or something like this, is that you can really drill down on a particular animal, into history going back, or even just what happened in a particular year. Say we have this heifer here, we click on this A301, it gives us the history here in terms of the animal, in terms of the pedigree of everything, performance, health, all the way down. It gives you drilled down information you just can't as easily get at your fingertips, with like a spreadsheet or something, or even like QuickBooks or something, that's the idea of this is to focus here on the animals that you have. This takes you to the different groups of animals you might have. So like if we looked at these steers here they had in this pen, this would give us all of the animals there, those 78 animals. And then if we clicked on one of these animals, then it would give us down to even just the harvest characteristics in terms of like that carcass. Carcass weight was 844. The fat thickness was 0.54. Marbling 550. Yield grade 3. That detailed information. So if we're making genetic selection decisions, we could see, how this bull performed on several different dams and not just one. So we can get that kind of detailed information. The other thing is as well that you could do here in like a program like this is look at your pastures. You're not going to be able to do that with QuickBooks or anything, but that's fine as well as that. But this is the idea is they use Google Maps to overlay so you can kind of move from pasture to pasture, see where your livestock have been and whatnot. The pasture movements, all that there going forward, and then see kind of your herd mix on the different pastures. The equipment, track which equipment you have there. It's probably the bigger thing is tracking what equipment gets used what, on which different enterprises, especially if you've got goats, sheep, and cattle, all, how do you separate out that? It becomes more complicated. Herd health, obviously, you can drill down to what you would have there, specifics. And of course, all this comes together with a price. This is, I think, a little bit old, might be a little bit higher right now. I haven't checked real recently, but if you have less than 100 animals, it's going to be $9 a month. If you're, like up to 500, $14 a month. So, it's something that starts to add up. It's something you have to really use in order to get the utility out of it. It doesn't make any sense to subscribe to it and then not get your data put in there to where you can use it to help you manage.
The other cool thing about that and many of your other competitors is that it's cloud-based. So you can just get on your phone and look at CattleMax, how that what's that calf out of or whatever too.
Yeah,
So it's portable with you on your phone.
Do you use that, Dean, or
I
no?
do.
You do use Cadillacs, okay, yeah.
But I'm not advertising, there's several
Yeah.
good programs, but the cool thing is they're cloud-based that you can, you know. have
Yeah,
some
so the
tracks.
idea is it's kind of like you have your pocketbook. Everybody's on their smartphone now, so if you're out on your horse, whatever, and looking at that, you could technically look it up if you have coverage. That's right. So that is what's about there. QuickBooks, so that's another thing that's often used for records. And the biggest advantage, of course, of QuickBooks is that, you know, you get your records in there, you can take them to an accountant and do your taxes, or you can do them directly yourself pretty easily. You know, Cadillacs isn't going to do your taxes for you, you know. It's something you may be able to export some of your expenses and whatnot, but this takes care of the thing that everybody has to do every year, you know, whether they want to or not, or it's supposed to do every year. I guess maybe a lot of people claim they don't have to, but, you know, there's things that QuickBooks will work for. I mean, I think QuickBooks works a lot better if you're like in a feedlot where you're buying your cattle and selling, but it's difficult to use in terms of when cattle are being born and whatnot. There's ways to kind of make it do that where you have it, you know, like you buy a stock for like $1 or something, and then you impute that there. But it's not as easy to use as especially for tracking inventories as the livestock programs out there. Kansas State University's put together some things on how to do some of those things you can do to QuickBooks to make it try to work better for farmers. And Oklahoma State did some things as well. But the Kansas State, if you do a Google on there with QuickBooks, that's probably the best place, I think, to look in terms of kind of a manual for using QuickBooks to adapt to some of the things for agriculture.
Really quick,
Yeah.
really fast question. Does QuickBooks have an ag like plugin, or like I know they got plugins for all kinds of different industries? Do they have that, or?
Not that I know of. Yeah,
Okay,
they talked about doing that, you know, or a long time, several years ago, there were some people from Intuit were talking about doing that, and they were like, kind of like saying, why would we do this, you know? And well, there's like 2 million farmers, and they're like, 2 million farmers? What is that, you know? You know, I mean, that's a really specialized market in the sense that they're looking at, you know, 350 million kind of consumer market in the U.S., you know, and yeah.
So where do we get that then, like the?
You can get this online, yeah, just
Farmer's Guide to QuickBooks?
yeah. This is a manual that has the, Farmer's Guide to QuickBooks, but, so, yeah, go ahead and you can Google this and look it up, but I can give it to you as well too, but Kansas State, this guide here is pretty handy. So in about 10 minutes here, we're going to be headed out to Steadfast Farm up in Mesa there. The easiest way to get there, I think the quickest way, is probably to go all the way up, it's 87, right? All the way up to 60, rather than going through Queen Creek.
Yeah, don't take Ellsworth, there's construction everywhere, and you're going to have to put it on your own GPS. But if you can get on 60, drop back down, and then it's Ray Road right into his.
Right, because it's a lot better, a lot quicker. I mean, it's a few or more miles, but we'll all get there in about 45 minutes. Whereas if you try to go through Quinn Creek, it may be less miles, but it's probably going to take you an hour to get there through the traffic. But one of the things I think you'll pick up on there, and I'll just point out a few things, hopefully to entice you to go there if you are wondering whether you should go or not. But Eric has moved his operation, I think, like 3 times. And every time he's moved to a smaller base, smaller egg size. And part of it is because he's found that it's more profitable for him to be working the same ground more over and not having it lay idle. So the more he can keep a crop on there, the more he can keep his organic matter up intact and weeds down and everything else. And plus the location he has is very ideal here as well, right being in Mesa there. It's not too far from the end of the runway, I don't think, on the Mesa runway there. But he's got a lot of different things going on. He has a hoop house there that he installed, a couple with regards to where you receive EQIP funds to put these up. But I mean, one of the things we find with high tunnels is that they're very labor intensive. Well, he has these on electric motors here, you know, so that they go up when it gets warm, down when it gets cold. They've got vents here on the end here, you know, to open, whatnot. You know, that's really what helps make a high tunnel work in terms of keeping some of that labor cost down, because otherwise you're out there, you know, it's like a dairy. You're out there 7 days a week, you know, night and day, you know, at least twice a day, raising and lowering that. It just gets to be very burdensome. You know, he goes around to different markets. He's got a lot of different things he does for the marketing. And he keeps a lot of records. And, you know, one of the reasons we keep records as well is for the food safety, for our own protection. And that's, you know, we have the crop record books here on that side. We have different things in there for keeping, you know, contacts, plot information, this equipment. Why would we want to have this contact information? You have to think about, what if I'm not here tomorrow, right? You know, or can somebody else figure out, or maybe, you know, everybody has their phone as well, which is handy. I mean, I keep most of my records there to try to keep track of people, but you also need to think of what is maybe the password to your phone or whatnot, so somebody else could get it if you're not here. I guess, you know, keep track of the planting dates, the harvest and whatnot. All that's important. What did you do for the day? You know, when it comes to applying pesticides, we have to think about, you know, how much did we put on? Was it applied appropriately? All that stuff was there, you know, kind of for our own protection to a certain extent. And these are logs that you can put in, and they're all in these crop books as well here. Again, precipitation, another thing to keep in mind that's in there, just like within the livestock record books. Harvest records here, that's something that's often important to keep track of here. This was a place in the community where they just had tomatoes where you could come and just pick them, but they wanted you to record what was there so they knew how much they had grown for the season there. So that all is something that you can keep track in the record books here as well. So if we were to just summarize, I guess, there are just kind of 5 steps here when you might think about in terms of the record-keeping side, where we keep all of our income and expenses, we record the transactions, you know, that we get, and we transfer these entries we might have into a monthly ledger in here mainly, so that we can kind of summarize it at the end of the year. So we can estimate what our farm profit or loss is, because like if you're going to FSA for a loan, that's what they really want to see. You know, what is kind of your bottom line for this enterprise? You know, if you have that data, that would be gold for them, or even a commercial bank in terms of, you know, how much you were able to generate in terms of profit, you know, from your activity over the year. They can see, and then if you can break it out in terms of how much you had for like your sheep versus your goats versus your cattle, you know, that's even all the much more better in terms of being able to see where your profitability lies there. And a lot of this goes to where you want to get down to where you know kind of what your break even is. Like Dean mentioned there, with his sale, if he got to where he was only getting like $1,600, he figured that may not cover all his expenses. So you don't want to be selling at a loss. So you want to be able to identify that, you know, kind of pricing point, so that you can at least cover what you have in terms of your costs there in that. And also we want to know kind of in terms of our balance sheet as well, so that over time we'll see how we're progressing or degressing in terms of, you know, our net worth. It gets complicated with farming and ranching. Why? Because when I took a farm management class as fresh out of high school, what was the one thing the farm instructor said when we got through all this of the negative returns? He said, "What's the one thing we haven't accounted for here?" The price of land, right? He said, you know, and it's the same today as well, right? It's like the price of land keeps going up and up, basically it's keeping up with inflation anyway, or maybe even better. So that's the one thing that the balance sheet will do, is try to put it in perspective, at least in terms of how your operation is doing with the value of the land and the ranch in particular. Because that's something that's always going to be there in terms of the value that you have there. It's not necessarily tied to the production of the cattle, but land has value in more than just production of cattle, and it could be recreation, it could be building homes as well, right? When you think of farming, in particular here in the Central Valley, or the valley here, around the Phoenix area in particular, land has value with regards to potential for housing. So I guess just to summarize all these things here, I mean, keep in mind, we do records so we can help measure, record and track, so we can just manage better what we have over time. And if we're unable to really, measure anything and record, then we don't really know if we've met our goals or if we are really even, profitable or not, sustainable.